Thank you very much. And the topic which I am going to speak, that is basic structure doctrine and the amendment in the Constitution. Now, as you told me that this is a lecture series, we are Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer lecture series, and it is beneficial for the students of LLM. So without going into the present crisis that we are all facing and we are all exposed by that, that is the corona. So I thought that this time I'd be speaking on some issue which is very relevant for the students of LLM, and to know the basic structure theory as to what is the purpose, how it has come into existence, and whether that theory is still as powerful as it was originated in 1973 in the basic structure case, that is Keshwaran Bharti case. So now today I'll be speaking on that theory with reference to the amendment to the Constitution. So there are two parts of my lecture. One is that the amendment procedure of in the Constitution. This is one, and I'll be throwing a little bit light on the amending procedure as to why amendment is required, and then how this amendment has developed into a limitation on the parliamentary power to amend, that is by the judiciary, basic structure theory. So out of these two aspects, first of all, the thing is that everybody knows that the society is not a static society. It is always changeable. So in that reference, it is required that whatever law, whatever documents, whatever we can say rules and regulations are to be made, those rules and regulations must have certain provisions so that it can adapt the changes which are to come in the future. And similarly, on that point, when the Constitution was started drafting, so the first point in the mind of the members of the Constituent Assembly, right from the beginning of the Constitution, was that whether there would be a provision for the amending procedure or not. And if it would be there in the Constitution, then whether it would be a rigid procedure or it should be a flexible procedure. So when this concern in the members of the Constituent Assembly was there, then the constitutional advisor, B.N. Rao, he has circulated the notes to all the members of the Constituent Assembly, and that note was containing of the procedure of amendment in various constitutions, particularly Canadian Constitution, American Constitution, then South African Constitution, Australian Constitution, and the Irish Constitution, as well as the Constitution of Switzerland. And with that note, which was consisting of the provisions of the amendment in these various constitutions, B.N. Rao also circulated a questionnaire to the members of the Constituent Assembly so that they may go through the provisions of the amendment in various constitutions, and then they may come out with their proposal as to what we have to do for our constitution, that is the Constitution of India. So when this Constitution of India was being drafted, at that time, two members of the Constituent Assembly, that is Gopalaswamy Iyengar and Alladi Krishna Swamy Iyer, these two members, they have put certain provisions in the amending procedure, and they have suggested that whatever amendment is to be there, that should not be very rigid and that should not be very flexible at the same time. So this we can say proposal and recommendation was accepted by the Constituent Assembly, and later on when the draft was being made, so this was put by the Union Constitution in their clause 232. That is, two-thirds member of the legislature, they will initiate the provision for amending the Constitution, and thereby the Constitution will be amended. So when on 30th June 1947 was the date when this was to be brought before the Constituent Assembly for debate and discussion, then Dr. Ambedkar, he said that we have made two, we can say, split in the provisions of making the amendment in the constitution. One, those provisions in which this two-third majority and ratification of the state is not required. And the second is related to those provisions in the constitution where which are considered to be related to the federal structure of the constitution where ratification by the state is required. So on these aspects, this draft article 304 that was passed in the Constituent Assembly, and later on it has become the article 368 when the constitution was renumbered and finally enforced. So we see that article 368, which is a part of which is there in the part 20th of the constitution, and having only one article, that is article 368, and that provides for the procedure to amend the constitution. Now, when we talk about the procedure to amend the constitution, then we must know as to what are the various modes, what are the various methods in which the constitution can be amended. So basically we see that there are two types of the methods in which the constitution can be amended. And the first method is known as the informal method of amending, and the second is the formal method of amendment. So far as the informal method of amendment is concerned, again we find that this is further divided into two parts. One is known as the informal method through judicial interpretation, and the second is the informal method of amendment, that is through the constitutional conventions and constitutional usages. Now, if we see that this informal method of amending the constitution, it simply does not change into the text of the constitution. There is no formal amendment, there is no changing of the provisions of the constitution, but only because of the judicial interpretation or because of the constitutional conventions and constitutional usages, this informal method of amendment is there. And we have the example in our country also. We see that through the judicial interpretation, many changes have been made in the existing provisions of the constitution. Those provisions are also binding, as Justice Kuldeep Singh said in Supreme Court on Records Association case of 1993, that the constitutional conventions, the interpretations, though this is not the part of the constitution, still they are binding. So the method of judicial interpretation, we know that it works as a judicial activism, judicial creativity, and we all know that Article 21 of the Constitution, which provides for the right to life and personal liberty, has emerged out in a number of fundamental rights within this Article 21, whether it be right to education before 86th Amendment, right to pollution-free environment, right to food, right to dignity, right to livelihood, so many rights that has been, we can say, now the part of the Constitution. But the Article 21 is not amended. So informal amendment through judicial interpretation. So one is through the judicial interpretation, other is through the ordinary legislations also. In that ordinary legislation, the text of the constitution does not amend, and there is amendment in the provision. For example, if we see Article 2 and 3 of the constitution, which provides for the changing of the boundaries of the state, changing of the names of the state, and all these, that can be done. But for that, whatever changes have been made, those changes will not be brought in the category of the amendment to the Constitution. Article 4 provides for that. So similar provisions are there for the judicial interpretation. The second is the constitutional conventions and constitutional usages, we know. And for example, in India, we see that there is a provision for planning board, and now it is known as the Niti Aayog. So we don't find this planning board or Niti Aayog in the Constitution of India, but as a convention, as a constitutional usages, these recommendations of this planning board or Niti Aayog, as it is known now, so these are being accepted and are the part of the constitutional working. So these are known as the constitutional conventions. And the best example of this constitutional convention we find in the British Constitution. We all know that in Britain there is no written constitution. So constitutional conventions and constitutional usages only, those are there which provide for the amending on the informal method. Then we find that the second type of the method, which is known as the formal method. Formal method of the amendment of the constitution may be of two types. One is rigid method, other is flexible method. And this formal method is basically found in those constitutions which are written constitution, and basically the federal constitution. As I have given you the example that the constitutional as advisor has circulated the amending procedure of some of the countries. So if we look back to the Australian and American constitution, then the procedure to amend the constitution is very, very rigid there. There are two stages to amend the constitution. One is through initiation, and the second is known as the ratification. So once it has to be initiated in the house of the legislature, and then after the proved majority, when it is passed, then it will be sent for ratification to the states and all this. And after the ratification only, it would be considered that finally there is an amendment. So American as well as Australian constitution, these two constitutions provides for the two stages amendment, initiation and later on this ratification. Canadian constitution is also a federal constitution, but we all know that prior to 1982, when they were being governed by the BNA, British North American Act, so there was no provision for amendment. The British Parliament can only amend the Canadian Constitution. It was only after 1982 that the Canada Act was passed by the British Parliament, and now they have certain provisions for the amending the Constitution. So when the Constitution was being drafted, the Constitution, the authors of the Constitution, or as we know, the fathers of the Constitution, founding fathers of the Constitution, they all have gone through these various provisions, and then they find that instead of giving the discretion to the judiciary or to the other organs of the state, we should make the provisions in the Constitution itself, so that the provisions which are of less importance, which will not be directly affecting the federal character of the nation, then there may be a flexible mode of amendment. And the other provisions which are to touch the federal character, then those provisions should be amended in a rigid manner. So we see that in our constitution, there are three types of the provisions which are given under the Constitution of India under Article 368. So if we go through Article 368, then everybody must be aware of as to what are the provisions in the Constitution and how it has to be amended. So we find that there are three procedures. One is known as the simple amendment by simple majority. The second is known as the amendment by the special majority. And the third one is known as the amendment by the special majority, but that is to be ratified or ratification by the state concerned. So initially, prior to 24th Amendment to the Constitution, that caption or the marginal note of Article 368 was the procedure to amend the Constitution. And under that, the provision was to amend the Constitution through these three methods: simple majority, special majority, and third one was a special majority with that of the ratification by the states concerned. So I'm not going into the detail as to what are the provisions under the Constitution Article 368, but very specifically I would like to tell you that the provision regarding the special majority by the state and the ratification by the state, the provisions which are to be amended by this procedure are related to Article 54, which is related to the President, Article 55, which relates to the presidential election, then Article 73 and 162, which is related to the extent of the union power or executive power in union as well as in the states. 73 speaks for the union and 162 speaks for the states. Then Article 241, which speaks about the high courts in the union territories, and then high courts of the states and the union judiciary and legislative relation, that is given in chapter part 11th of the constitution, and at the same time seventh schedule to the constitution, which speaks about the legislative relation or distribution of powers between the center and the state, and at the same time the representation of the states in the parliament, and finally article 368 itself. So these are certain provisions where we find that the amendment to these provisions in the constitution can be done only by a special majority with the ratification of the states concerned. Now the question is that whether this provision has to be applied in all the cases and how it has to be applied. So when we see regarding the constitutional amendment, then we find that it has to be amended at a reasonable interval, because once a constitution or once the document has been prepared, in our case it was prepared and finally enforced in 1950. So since 1950, and it is to run for the future also, it is to run and it has to meet out the changing situation in the society. So it has to be reasonably amended, and reasonably amended at the reasonable interval also. So a constitution which is static, it becomes a big hurdle, and when it becomes a big hurdle for the progress of the nation as such, so it is not to be static, it has to be changed, so that the constitution for which is made for the will of people of India, they should not face any difficulty. Difficulty in what? Difficulty in being governed by that constitution which is not fulfilling their needs, which is not fulfilling their demand. So if there was no provision regarding the amendment in the constitution, then it may happen that the people would have taken recourse of some extra constitutional methods, like revolution or something like that. So it is required that there must be amendment provision in the constitution, and that's why part 20th of the constitution, consisting of article 368, provides for the amendment in the constitution. So this is the first part, that amendment in the constitution that is rigid, that may be flexible, and India is a country which has incorporated both these methods of rigidity as well as flexibility, because we have witnessed, or the constitution makers, they have seen that in US, if we see the first amendment of the US in the US constitution, which provides for the freedom of speech and expression and press as such, so that they have given as an absolute right. And we all know that a right can never be an absolute right. There must be certain restrictions if we have to live in a regulated society. So what was happening in US, that because of this first amendment, absolute right has been conferred, there was no restriction on that right, and when this right was being exercised in due course of time, Supreme Court of the United States, that has taken the lead, and the Supreme Court there, that they have introduced certain restrictions in the name of the police power, in the name of the eminent domain, in the name of the judicial review. So various, we can say, restrictions have been imposed by interpretation in the US Constitution. So the constitution makers, they were of the opinion that without leaving this discretion to the judiciary, we will put the provisions in two methods, that is rigid as well as flexible. So that's why we have the three types of the procedure to amend the constitution. So when the constitution was enforced, and in 1950, the very first amendment was made in 1951, whereby we see that article 31 B, A and B have been included in the constitution part 4. Part 3rd. At the same time, we see that schedule 9th was also inserted. At the time of the enforcement, there were 8 schedules. Later on, this 9th schedule was inserted by first amendment to the constitution. Because if we look back to the Indian history, then we see that the manifesto of the Congress was for the agrarian reforms, for giving the rights to the persons who are in the agricultural or agricultural labor, all these things. So property rights and agricultural rights, that was in the manifesto of the Congress party. And that's why the first amendment that was brought regarding the right to property and this land reform laws, and that's why 9th schedule was inserted in the constitution, which simply means that the land laws will be put under ninth schedule of the Constitution, and they will be immune from the judicial review, that these laws cannot be questioned before the judiciary, either it's a High Court or the Supreme Court. So when this first amendment was made, then the challenge to this first amendment was brought before the Supreme Court in the famous case of Shankari Prasad versus Union of India. Now, this Shankari Prasad was Union of India, the amendments which was challenged on the ground that the word law under Article 13 Clause 2 also includes the law of the amendment to the Constitution under Article 368. And so Article 31A and 31B are invalid because these are the two provisions which are abridging or taking away the fundamental rights under Article 14 as well as 19 of the Constitution. Because we all know Article 13(2) provides that it's an obligation on the state that they will not, the competent body will not legislate, which is inconsistent with the provisions of Part 3rd of the Constitution. And Article 14 and Article 19 are the provisions under Part 3rd. One provides for the equality right, other confer certain freedoms. So when 31B A and B have been inserted, and thereby they have restricted the exercise of Article 14 and 19. So this was challenged that because it is unconstitutional under 13(2), it is inconsistent of Article 14 and 19. This amendment should not be declared as constitutional, and that's why this challenge was made in the court in this Shankari Prasad case. So on this issue, the court has also, we can say, given the definition of the word that is contained in Article 13 Clause 3A, that it is not expressly providing for the constitutional amendments. So here the court 13(3)(a) is that relates to the what shall be the law, that includes in the law rules, regulations, ordinance, notification, etc., etc. So constitutional amendment is not there. So here in this case, Shankari Prasad case, the court held that although the amendment is superior to an ordinary legislation, and hence it will not be hit by Article 13 Clause 2. That is, a law made by the Parliament as an ordinary legislation, only that would be checked on the touchstone of Article 13 Clause 2. But if it is a parliamentary amendment, if it is a constitutional amendment, then this is not the ordinary legislation, that is constitutional amendment, and that would not be hit by Article 13 Clause 2. So the word law under Article 13(2) ordinarily includes the constitutional amendments, but it must be taken to mean the exercise of the ordinary legislative power. And here the court held as amendment made in the exercise of the constituent power of the Parliament are not subject to Article 13 Clause 2, and such power, we can say, includes the amendments of the fundamental rights as well. So under the amendment of the constituent power, fundamental rights can be amended. This was the decision of the Supreme Court in this Shankari Prasad case. And we see that the court in this case used a very literal interpretation and to resolve this conflict, and it has upheld the validity of the First Amendment. And it also held that Article 368 empowers the Parliament to amend the Constitution without any exception, and that the fundamental rights cannot be amended, or that Article 368 being an exception to fundamental rights, it is like that. So fundamental rights can be amended by the constituent power under Article 368. This was the judgment of the Supreme Court in Shankari Prasad regarding First Amendment. Now, when this First Amendment was declared as constitutional, then the situation continued, and after that we see that various other amendments were also brought by the Parliament, and particularly Fourth Amendment to the Constitution was related to some land reforms, but that was not challenged in the court of law. Finally, when the 17th Amendment Act of 1964 was brought in, again that was related to this land reforms, and various acts were put under the 9th schedule, which were, we can say, absolved from the judicial review power of the judiciary, and that 17th amendment was challenged because prior to that 17th amendment, 44 acts were brought into our house, we can say, in the 9th schedule. And those were related to the violation of various fundamental rights of the common man, of the citizen concerned. And that cannot be challenged because it has been housed in 9th schedule of the Constitution. And that's why we see that another case was brought before the Supreme Court, and wherein the 17th Amendment was challenged, and that is Sajjan Singh case, Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. This was decided in 1965. So after this Sankari Prasad case, this judicial review, that was a matter before the judiciary, and in this Sajjan Singh case, we see that the majority of the judges in Sajjan Singh case are decided on the same logic as it was decided in Sankari Prasad, that the power of the parliament to amend the constitution, including the fundamental rights, is done under their constituent power and not as an ordinary legislation. So it is not violative of 13 clause 2, or it is not subject to article 13(2). So it also held that Sankari Prasad was rightly decided, and it has affirmed that Parliament under 368 can amend any provisions, including the fundamental rights. And it has also made a very, we can say, brilliant suggestion at that time. It was being said that the fundamental rights should be included in the proviso to Article 368. That if these type of the questions are being brought before the judiciary, be it Sankari Prasad or 4th Amendment or 17th Amendment, so to settle down the thing, the court suggested in this case that we can go for making a suggestion that there must be a provision in 368 which provides that the fundamental rights are also included in this. So this was not, we can say, completed therein. But one thing which was very important in this Sajjan Singh case was that the case was decided by majority and minority view. And two judges, that is Justice Hidayatullah and Justice Madolkar, they dissented from the majority view. That is upholding the constitutional validity of 17th Amendment. These two judges, they were of the view that this cannot be done. Now, Hidayatullah Justice, he was of the opinion that the Constitution gives so many assurances in Part 3rd, that is fundamental right, and that it would be difficult that if they were be the playthings in the hands of the simple majority by the parliamentarians. So if this would be the situation, then nothing sacrosanct would remain with Part 3rd of the Constitution, which are the assurances, which are the guarantees to the citizens' right. And so to hold that, this would mean prima facie that we can say some most solemn parts of the Constitution stands on the same footing. It is not only the fundamental rights, but some other parts also. And any other part, if there is a majority of the members in the parliament of a single party, so by special majority, they can do or undo any part of that provision of the Constitution. So in order to avoid this thing, there must be a theory that these fundamental rights are very sacrosanct part, and these cannot be amenable by the constitutional amendments. So at present, it was advised by the judge, that is Justice Hidayatullah, that I can only say that the power to make the amendment ought not ordinarily to be means to escape the absolute constitutional restrictions, but he was of the opinion that the provisions under Part 3rd of the Constitution should not be made as amenable by the constituent amending power. This was the one view of Justice Hidayatullah, that the fundamental rights are not amenable. Justice Madholkar, he was also the judge who has given a dissenting opinion in the Sajjan Singh case, and he said that the constitutional amendments can be excluded from the definition of the law under Article 13 of the Constitution. And why it is so? Because his argument was that there are certain basic principles which could not be changed. So the theory of this basic principle was brought by Justice Madholkar's dissenting view in Sajjan Singh case. And Justice Madholkar concurred his opinion, by which was also accepted by Chief Justice Gajendra Gadkar, and he questioned that if we can say that it is also a matter for the consideration whether marking it, whether there must be a change in the constitution, basic feature of the constitution, and can it affect to the extent of rewriting the part of the constitution or to throw away the entire constitution. And if it would be like that, then we can say that would it be in the purview of article 368 itself, because the parliament has been driving the power from the constitution, the other authorities or other organs are deriving the power from the constitution. So the provision 368, which is the part of the constitution, can be we can say rewrite by the parliamentarian. So this was his query, this was his question, and this was not, we can say, useless in terms of the various, we can say, other things which were going on in the country at that time. This was the decision of 1965, and in 1965 we'll find that the history or the story before the this basic structure that was started from the law school BHU in a lecture which was given by a German philosopher and German professor Konrad Dietrich. So I'll be discussing that later. Before that, I'll come to another judgment which was given by the Supreme Court, and that was I.C. Golaknath versus State of Punjab. So in that I.C. Golaknath was the case where we see that there was a great hue and cry regarding the fundamental rights and the amenability of these fundamental rights and the power and procedure of the parliament to amend the constitution. So there were two schools which were, we can say, started criticizing the judgments of the court, that if there would be a complete majority in the parliament, then any provision of the constitution can be amended. So how come this fundamental rights, which are said to be very sacrosanct provision in the constitution, if that would be amended, then naturally there will remain nothing. The second school of thought was of the opinion that because we have adopted for a welfare concept of the state, the socio-economic development are very much required. So for that purpose, this is the obligation of the state to amend the constitution, and the property rights, etc., those may be amended accordingly. So these two, we can say, conflicting thoughts were coming up in the society. And considering all this, the then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Subba Rao, Justice Subba Rao, he himself started this opinion, and then a case was filed that is known as the I.C. Golaknath versus State of Punjab. And the strong reservations of the minority in Sajjan Singh case prompted Chief Justice Subba Rao to constitute a larger bench. And this was a bench of 11 judges. This was in 1967. And 11 judges have to consider the constitutional validity of the first, fourth, and 17th constitutional amendment. As I told you, first amendment was declared constitutional in Shankari Prasad, 17th amendment in Sajjan Singh case. So once again in I.C. Golaknath, the first, fourth, and 17th amendment have been brought for challenge and for discussion. So the amendment, in view of the, we can say, doubts which were expressed by Justice Hidayatullah and Justice Madholkar, so these were challenged in this I.C. Golaknath case, and Justice Subba Rao, he delivered the majority judgment for himself, for Justice Sikri, for Justice Shelat, for Justice Shah, and Vedalingam, whereas Justice Hidayatullah was also with him, delivering a conquering judgment. So by a majority of 6-5, we can say it's a very razor-thin minority majority decision, but 6-5 majority, it was held that Parliament had no power to amend the fundamental rights. The two judgments reached to the same conclusion, although they took a different mode or opposite view to reach to that amending power of the Constitution. That is, what is the source of the amending power to the Constitution. Now, Justice Subba Rao held that Article 368 contains only the procedure for the amendment, and it does not contain the power to amend the Constitution. So, if it is not the power of the amending the Constitution, then that power has been taken from the residuary power. Residuary power, that is in 7th schedule, list 1, entry 97, read with Article 248. and thereby the parliament has the power to amend the constitution, because 368 speaks only about the procedure to amend the constitution. So how to amend that constitution, that is there in 368, but who can and where from the power is coming, that has to be taken from 248 of the constitution, read with entry 97 list 1. So restitutory power, that is there. So this was the judgment of Justice Subbarao, that the power is not there in Article 368, as the legislative power is subject to the provisions of this constitution. Hence, Article 13 clause 2 constituted a bar to the amendment, and that cannot abridge or take away the fundamental rights. So the majority judgment was that the fundamental rights cannot be taken away, it cannot be abridged by the parliamentary amendment, by the amending the constitution. The majority judgment overruled Shankari Prasad case as well as this Sajjan Singh case also, and held that no distinction between the legislative and constituent power can be there. So this was the case where from we can say that there is a question whether amendment is a law or not. So this was the case where we say that amendment is a law, and once it is a law, it has to be checked on the touchstone of Article 13 clause 2, that it should not be inconsistent or contradictory or in contravention to the provisions of part 3rd of the constitution. So amendment is a law. It was held in Golaknath case. And now if we see that Golaknath case that was decided in 1967, the first amendment was done in 1951, and 1951 till 1967 so many laws have been enacted, various laws have been put in the 9th schedule of the constitution, and various persons they have taken, or the various rights have been accrued in various persons concerning regarding the land and property. So if this decision, which is declaring the earlier amendments as unconstitutional, then there would be a civil unrest in the society. And how to do away with that civil unrest, the court has evolved the doctrine of prospective overruling. Prospective overruling simply means that the decision would be applicable from the date of its decision, that is onwards. It is not to be applicable retrospectively. The judgment date, that is when the date judgment was given, that would be applicable on the other future date, and it would not be applicable retrospectively. That means whatever rights have been accrued, whatever rights have been emerged out of those laws which have been enacted earlier, that will not be affected. However, it would be only relating to the onwards situation, that fundamental rights cannot be amended. And that's why the court, while it struck down the 3 amendments, evolved this doctrine of prospective overruling, under which the decisions would have the retrospective operation, and it had a prospective operation, and there would be no retrospective operation. And also held that the date of the judgment, in this case the parliament, shall have no power to amend the fundamental rights. Now when this IC Golaknath case was decided, then there was a great hue and cry in the parliament regarding the supremacy of the parliament. There was a tussle between the judiciary and the parliament, because the power of the parliament to amend the constitution, that has been taken away in this IC Golaknath case. So what happened, that a private member bill was introduced in the parliament, and that is Nath Pai. Nath Pai bill was introduced in the parliament, and that bill was relating to what has been declared by the Supreme Court in Golaknath case, to neutralize that thing, so that again the power can be taken by the parliament to amend the constitution. So at that time, it was in 1969, that bill was given to the standing committee of the parliament also, and after that there was a split of the Congress in Congress I and other, and later on in 1971 we see that the Congress party, which has again come into power with thumping majority, at that time they introduced a 24th amendment to the constitution. So this was, we can say, one of the reaction of the Golaknath judgment of the Supreme Court of 1967, whereby the parliament has been not to allow the amendment in the fundamental rights and other provisions of the constitution, and that's why to neutralize or to undo the decision of the Golaknath, this 24th amendment has been brought in the constitution, wherein the first thing was that the very marginal note of Article 368 was amended. Because as I told you, Justice Subba Rao said that there is no power in 368 to amend the constitution, only procedure is there. So now it reads like the power of the parliament to amend the constitution and procedure therefore. So procedure has been procedure as well as power is made in amended in the Article 368 caption. At the same time, another provisions have also been amended in Article 368, and as an abundant caution, we can say 368 and 13, Article 13, both have been inserted with a new clause. Under Article 13, Clause 4, that the whatever is to be done, that is not to be considered as the amendment in the amendment in 368, and similar provision was made in 368 clause 3 also. So this has been done in 24th amendment. Then 25th amendment was also brought by the parliament, whereby again 31C has been amended. So when these amendments were there at that time, these were all related to the land and property and were put in the 9th schedule of the constitution. Then the time came that the Supreme Court has again had the opportunity to decide one more case on that point, and that is Keshwan and Bharti versus State of Kerala. So everybody knows that this is the case which is related to the basic structure constitution, also known as the fundamental rights case. But if we see the story behind that fundamental right case, then we have to see that there was a paper published by A.G. Noorani, behind the basic structure doctrine. As I told you that it was due to that this lecture of Konrad Dietrich, a German professor who was a professor of law in the Heidelberg University, and that he has delivered a judgment in law school BHU, whereby he has given the lecture on the limitations, applied limitations on the amending power of the constitution. Because he was of the opinion that India has not seen this type of the amending, we can say, conflict. So whether there is any provision which can restrict that, or there are certain principles which are said to be the basic principles which cannot be amended. So the lecture was on that line, and perhaps the position of the Supreme Court, we can say, is influenced by this fact that it has not been so far confronted with any extreme type of the constitutional amendment, and it is the duty that it has to be seen by the jurist also, and to anticipate the extreme cases of the conflict, and sometimes only the extreme tests reveal the true nature of the legal concept. So for this purpose, legal discussion was made, and we can say the effective amendments have been also done, and thereby we see that certain questions were put by A.G. Noorani, that can we say that there can be an amendment by 2/3 majority which can change Article 1 of the Constitution, by saying that India is to be divided into 2 states only, for example, Tamil Nadu and Hindustan. Can it be like that? So similarly, there can be another question that could the Constitution amend Article 21 of the Constitution, and by saying that without procedure established by law, the life and personal liberty can be taken away by amending the Constitution, or particularly whether this Article 368, which confers the power to amend the Constitution, can be amended to such an extent that only the Prime Minister and the President of India can amend the Constitution, and not the Parliament, as it is given by 2/3 majority and ratification of it. So various questions were put out by A.G. Noorani in his article, which was published in 2001 in the Frontline, regarding the amending the Constitution in that respect. So, as I told you, Genesis was the Konrad Dietrich lecture, and then we find that M.K. Nambiar, he inspired by the Professor Konrad Dietrich, brought this issue in Golaknath case, and in that Golaknath case, judiciary was very hesitant to we can say pronounce this notion, and it was later on in Keshwan and Bharti case that the same we can say, argument was put by Nani Palkhiwala. And Nani Palkhiwala, who was the advocate in this Keshwaran Bharti case from the side of the petitioner, other advocates were Soli Sorabji and Palias Nariman was also there, and from the respondent side, the very well-known H.M. Sirvai was there, and he was assisted by T.R. Andiyarujina, who was the Solicitor General later on. So these were the advocates besides other that the case was argued before the Supreme Court, and 60 days continuously the arguments were going on this basic structure case regarding Keshwaran Bharti. So I'm not going into the fact situation as to what were the facts, but everything is related to the property and land issues. That's why this case was also brought on the concept of challenging the validity of 24th, 25th, 29th Amendment to the Constitution. So when Nani Palkhiwala argued this basic structure theory, and this time the court has successfully, we can say, propounded this theory of basic structure in this case. And as we know that basic structure was inspired by an exceptional display of art, courage and craft. And this was used by Upendra Bakshi, Professor Upendra Bakshi has written one article regarding courage, craft and contention in the Supreme Court in 1980s. And later on that the Supreme Court has exhibited the while evolving this doctrine of basic structure, which counts as one of the greatest contribution of the Indian judiciary to the theory of institutionalism. And then various other articles were also written in favoring this Keshwaran Bharti's case. So we find that this Keshwaran Bharti case, the largest bench was convened by the Supreme Court, 13 judges. And again, a very razor thin majority minority judgment was there, 7-6. And 11 judgments were written, raising 11 issues as to what were various issues. So one by one, I'll be discussing that. The first issue before the court was that what should be the rule of interpretation in this situation, and the court held that the hidden rules must be followed. Then the second issue was what is the meaning of the word this amend or amendment, whether these are the two same words or are two different words. So in this the court said that any amendment to the Constitution has to be within the limits of the essence of the Constitution, and Indian Constitution is the first and foremost a social document, and it is based upon the socio-economic ideals of the freedom struggle, and that's why the Parliament, which is a creation of the Constitution, cannot rob the Constitution of its vitality. So the second issue was that amendment is to be there, but amendment should not be in such a way so that the very existence of the Constitution may be taken away. So the third issue regarding that, what is the source of the amending power? So the court very simply said that the source is Article 368. Even prior to 24th Amendment, when this marginal note was changed, so Subba Rao Justice in Golaknath was wrongly interpreting that the power is not there, and the court in this case said that the amending power source is Article 368, and this can be amended. Then another issue before the Supreme Court in this Keshwaran Bharti case, that can it be said that the amendment is to be done by the people of India directly? Because the sovereign, that is the Parliament, the people of India can amend anything in the Constitution, but the court held that no, it cannot be done. India is a representative democracy, and once the people have elected their representatives, so they have the power to amend the Constitution, and the people of India cannot directly amend the Constitution. So this was another issue, because we don't have the referendum procedure in our country. So directly there cannot be any amendment by the people of India. It could be only through the representatives of the people. Then the fifth issue was regarding the declaring of this constituent power. So whether this constituent power has the Parliament acquired for itself the power to rise above the Constitution and bring about some alteration or changes in the Constitution. So the court said that the constituent power of the Parliament cannot be equated with the power of the Constituent Assembly, the power of the Constituent Assembly. and Constituent Assembly had the original constituent power, and under which it has created the constitution. But the parliament is not having that constituent power. It has the constituent power to amend the constitution only. Then another issue before the court was that does Article 13 Clause 2 controls Article 368? So Justice Hegde and Mukherjee, he has delivered this on this point, and he said that there is a need to harmonize between Article 13 Clause 2 and Article 368. So if we talk about Article 13(2), it refers to the ordinary legislative power of the Parliament and state legislature, whereas 368 speaks about the constituent power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution. But that 13(2), under that 13(2), the amendment is not a law. However, basic structure cannot be amended. So this was the decision on the sixth issue. Then there was seventh issue before the Supreme Court, that whether fundamental rights are amenable. The court has clearly said that fundamental rights are amenable, but basic structure is not. Basic structure is not amenable. Regarding whether doctrine of implied implications or limitations would be there in the Constitution, court said yes, that is there, because there are certain provisions and principles in every constitution which are said to be the basic principles, and those basic principles are also the part of the Indian Constitution also. And next issue before the court was that what is the scope of the judicial review? So in reference to Article 368, the court said that it can interfere in any amendment to the Constitution from the perspective of the substantive limitation, from the perspective of basic structure, and from the perspective of the procedural limitation. So the court said that judicial review is a power which cannot be taken away, and judiciary can review everything. So this ninth schedule, which was so far considered to be beyond the area or purview of the judicial review, the court said that everything can be reviewed by the judiciary. Then after that, if we see that what happened in this 360, in this case, the court said that under Article 368, Parliament can amend any provisions in the Constitution. Parliament can amend any part of the Constitution, but the Parliament cannot amend the basic structure of the Constitution or those principles of the Constitution so as to destroy, damage, or we can say deface the provisions in the Constitution. So this was the decision in Keshwaran Bharti case. However, another issue which was raised by H.M. Shirvai, who was the advocate from the respondent side, that his argument was that the doctrine of basic structure is a very vague doctrine. So we cannot define it as to what are those provisions which we can put under the doctrine of basic structure. So this is a liberal, or we can say a doctrine which can be elastically stretched later on. And we are finding that apprehension of H.M. Shirvai is proving to be correct one, because in Keshwaran Bharti, certain items have been brought by the judiciary that these would come under the definition or under the basic structure principles: secularism, then democratic nation, federal character, separation of power, rule of law. So something like that, they have said that these are the basic principles. But later on, we see that this application of Keshwaran Bharti basic structure is there continuously, and we find that a number of other principles were also held to be the basic structure to the Constitution. So this apprehension of H.M. Shirvai, who was the advocate from the respondent side, that basic structure doctrine is a vague doctrine, the court held that the doctrine of basic structure cannot be said to be vague merely because it cannot be rigidly defined, or all the elements of the basic structure have not been enumerated in that doctrine. So firstly, the court is bound to decide only those issues which are actually before it, and a decision on the other issues would only be an obiter dictum, and that is not to be binding. So the court has refrained on saying anything on this, whether this doctrine of basic structure is vague or not. Now, we see that this doctrine of basic structure was criticized, and there is a book written by T.R. Andiyarujina, as I told you, who was helping H.M. Sirvai from respondent side, and he had seen all the arguments and the proceedings of the court in that particular case. And he said that there was nothing like basic structure in the particular decision. Nothing has been written about the basic structure. And as we see that this case was finally decided by 7-6 majority. And the term basic structure was used only by Justice H.R. Khanna. And this basic structure or basic principle that was written by Justice H.R. Khanna, and that was lifted by Chief Justice Sikri, and he adopted this as the view of the majority, because the judgment was so large that a view of majority was also written as a summary. And we find that out of 13 judges, 11 judgments have come from this particular case on basic structure, and the view of majority that was signed only by 9 members or 9 judges of the Supreme Court. So this view of majority cannot be said to be the ratio of the case. This was the argument of T.R. Andiarjuna in his book, which he has written, that the view of the majority and the untold story of the basic structure. So after this, we can say judgment of Keshwanand Bharti, then we find that where we have to come, whether the amendment procedure has to be continued, whether this basic structure theory has to be there or not. Then we find that 39th amendment was in picture, that was challenged before the Supreme Court. And the case is Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. It was of 1975 case. Some of you may be aware about the election of Mrs. Indira Gandhi that was challenged in the Allahabad High Court, UP, and that was declared as void, that was declared as invalid, and on 12th June 1975. So yesterday it has completed almost 45 years. And on 12th June, Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha of the Allahabad High Court declared it unconstitutional. And then the appeal was filed by the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was on the vacation leave, and the vacation judge, Justice Krishna Iyer, has given the stay. So in order to see that this judgment, for which the date has been finally decided to be 11th August 1975, so that the election of Mrs. Gandhi may not be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and because the majority was there in the parliament of the Congress party, they have come out with this 39th amendment, whereby they have inserted Article 329A and particularly Clause 4 that was challenged. So this 329A that was inserted by 39th amendment, and you will see that to bring this constitutional amendment, only 4 days were there. The 7th of August, the bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha, passed on the same day. 8th August, brought in the Rajya Sabha, passed on the same day. Then 9th August, brought before the states for the ratification, and the states have given the ratification on the same day. And 10th of August, that is Sunday, that has got the assent of the President of India, and on the same date has been notified, because on Monday 11th August, the date was there in the Supreme Court to hear the matter of the election of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. So the provision of 39th amendment, which has inserted in the constitution, that was relating to the this election of the Prime Minister and the other VIPs should not be questioned before the Supreme Court. Particularly, Supreme Court shall have no power to judicial review in the election matters. The decision of the High Court, Allahabad, that has to be declared null and void. So these type of the provisions were inserted by 39th amendment, and naturally this is a direct attack on the democracy, direct attack on the free and fair election, and that's why this was challenged in Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. And here in this case, the court through Justice Matthews, through Justice Matthews, was of the opinion that this is a clear violation of the basic structure doctrine as held by the Supreme Court in Keshwanand Bharti case. So this was the case wherein for the first time we see that the Keshwanan Bharati's basic structure theory has been applied. So this was the first case. And here in this Indira Nehru Gandhi case, Chief Justice Ray observed that it should not be stated here that the hearing has to be proceeded on the assumption that it is necessary to challenge the majority view of Keshwaran Bharati case. So in this case, the rule of law, the democracy, and the free and fair election, all these things were also held to be the basic structure of the constitution. So after that 39th amendment, you see it was in August, and this all have been done during the emergency that was of June 75 on the ground of internal disturbance. So during that emergency period, another amendment has been brought in the constitution, that is 42nd amendment. And this 42nd amendment is also known as the mini constitution. So that various provisions in the constitution have been amended by this 42nd amendment, and particularly for which I am talking about, that is clause 4 and clause 5 in article 368, which are regarding the power of judicial review, as well as that no question can be brought before the Supreme Court if there is any amendment in the constitution by the parliament. So this was challenged in Minerva Mills case. We see that Minerva Mills case of 1980, that was having certain different fact situation. That was a case of the nationalization or taking over of a Sikh industry. But if you see one of the book written by the Chintan Chandrachud, he is the grandson of Justice Chandrachud, who has given the judgment here, and the present justice in the Supreme Court, his son, Chintan Chandrachud, he has written this book, some of the forgotten judgments. There he has written about this Minerva Mills case also. And in Minerva Mills case also, the issue was different. However, the judgment was given by the Supreme Court on the line of deciding the 42nd amendment, through which article 368 clause 4 and 5 have been inserted, and both these were held to be we can say unconstitutional. And Justice Chandrachud, he was there in this case, he was of the opinion that the harmony between part 3rd and part 4th of the constitution is the basic structure of the constitution. So this is one, and judicial review is again the basic structure of the constitution. It cannot be taken away by parliamentary amendment. Then after this 42nd amendment, we see that a number of cases were again decided by the Supreme Court in different amendments. For example, Kihoto Holohan, a distinct type of the judgment was given by the Supreme Court applying the rule of severability on the constitutional amendment. So you may be remembering this is a case related to the anti-defection and 10th schedule, which was inserted in the constitution. Para 7 of that 10th schedule, that was taking away the power of judicial review. So the court held that it has to be severed, para 7 has to be severed from the main provision, and 10th schedule is otherwise constitutional, barring this in this para 7. So after that, another case, that is Baman Rao was brought before the Supreme Court, and Baman Rao is the case wherein the Supreme Court has gone back to see as to what was said in this Keshwanan Bharati case relating to the laws which have been put in the 9th schedule. So the court in Baman Rao case said that after 24th April 1973, the date when the Keshwanan Bharati was decided, so after that date, if any law has been brought in 9th schedule, that is open for judicial review. And you will see that this 1981 judgment of Baman Rao, the similar judgment was given by the Supreme Court in 2007 in I.R. Kohilo case, which is also known as the 9th schedule case. And the same judgment was given by the Supreme Court unanimously. This was a 9 judges bench of the Supreme Court. A unanimous judgment was given by the Supreme Court in this particular judgment, wherein the Supreme Court held that all the judgments, all the laws which have been brought in 9th schedule after 24th April 1973, those are open for judicial review. If they are violating the fundamental rights, can be declared unconstitutional. So this was also one of the judgment of the Supreme Court relating to the application of the basic structure doctrine. Then we see regarding judicial review, as I told you, Minerva Mills case was there. Then SP Sampath Kumar 1987, L Chandra Kumar 1997. These were the cases where the power of judicial review was being taken by the parliamentary enactment, that is this SCAT, Central Administrative Tribunal, whereby Section 28 was there, which was ousting the power of the Supreme Court as well as of the High Court. So in Sampath Kumar, though Justice P.N. Bhagwati said that Supreme Court judicial review power cannot be taken, but High Court said by establishing a parallel mechanism. But this was again challenged, and in 1997, L. Chandra Kumar, the court said that no, the judicial review power of the High Court under 226 as well as the judicial review power of the Supreme Court, both are the basic structure of the Constitution and it cannot be taken away. Then after that, we find that S.R. Bommai case, another situation has been brought, and the court said that democracy, secularism, federalism, all these are the basic structure of the Constitution. So now you see that the list which was started in Keshwar and Bharti is now in the process of extension. And these three more, we can say, principles have been included in the list of the basic structure. Then we find this Indira Sahani judgment where the court said that the socialism is the basic principle of the Constitution. And after that, we find that 86th Amendment and 93rd Amendment to the Constitution, whereby Article 21A has been inserted in the Constitution as a fundamental right to education, and 93rd, whereby Article 15 Clause 5 was inserted, that is relating to the admission in the central institute. So those are the rights which are related to the minorities and private unaided minority colleges, etc. So we find that Pramati international case was decided by the Supreme Court, where the court said that these are the basic structure of the Constitution, and particularly 15.5 Ashok Kumar Thakur case, it was declared to be constitutional. At the same time, Indian Medical Association case, the court said that 15.5 is the basic structure of the Constitution. So you see that how this basic structure theory has been expanded and applied by the Supreme Court in the later judgments. And then we find this 99th judgment, 99th Amendment to the Constitution, wherein this National Judicial Appointment Commission Act was brought in, and whereby Article 124 ABC, all these have been inserted so that the appointment may be made through a commission. And that was challenged. Supreme Court advocates on Record Association versus Union of India, and the court by 4-1 majority declared that this is 99th Amendment is unconstitutional, being violative of the basic structure of the Constitution. So this time the basic structure was the primacy of the judiciary, the independence of judiciary. So this is the interference in the independence of judiciary, and that's why this cannot be declared as constitutional. So this 99th Amendment was also declared to be unconstitutional, and we find that NJAC is not there. So after this case, we see that the independence of judiciary was already taken by the Supreme Court, be it SP Gupta versus Union of India, Supreme Court as Advocates Association 1993 case, then Bal Mukund Shah versus State of Bihar case also. So these were the cases where we find that the Supreme Court has said that independence of judiciary is the basic structure, then separation of power is also the basic structure. So how the judiciary can have this appointment commission which is interfering in the other organ of the state, that judiciary with that of the executive and legislature. So every organ has to function separately because separation of power is the basic structure of the Constitution. So that's why we find that right from 1973 onwards, the Supreme Court has applied this doctrine of basic structure in a new way, by including many other principles as the basic structure of the Constitution. And then finally, the question was brought before the Supreme Court that these type of the basic structure, how we can say that all the provisions are related to this basic structure. Then we find that M. Nagaraj case, wherein three amendments, 76, 77, and 81 amendment, those were brought for the, we can say, for the challenge. And the court upheld the validity of all those constitutional amendments. and the court has, we can say, given the theory of the width test. And after that, in IR Coelho essence test or rights test. So these are some of the tests which were given or evolved by the Supreme Court. But these are all the tests which are not as easy to be applied in the future cases, and that's why we see that after this M. Nagraj and IR Coelho, one is of 2006, other is of 2007. In 2016, in this NJAC case, we find that again this doctrine of basic structure has been applied by the Supreme Court. Now, what we see in the on the Constitution Day, 26th November 2019, when the President of India was speaking on that day. So he said that the constitutional morality has to be observed by the constitutional authorities and constitutional functionaries. And constitutional authorities and functionaries includes all these, we can say, organs of the state, be it judiciary, legislature, or the executive. So we find a trend has been changed. And now you see that there are cases, be it Navtej Singh Johar case, be it Joseph Trine, be it Shaira Bano, or the other cases regarding this NCT Delhi case, where the court has started saying a new term, that is constitutional morality. So in terms of that constitutional morality, whether this basic structure theory is coming to an end or not, or whether this constitutional morality is also encapsulating this doctrine of basic structure. This is one of the questions on which further discussions are required. So far as the basic structure is concerned, Keshwaran Bharti was the origin point in India regarding Supreme Court decision. Konrad Dietrich lecture was the origin in terms of the academic discussion on that limitation on the amending power, and that's how it is being applied till now. And it has to be applied further also, as we see that it is in the process of. But at the same time, another evolution or another device which is being now brought by the judiciary, that is constitutional morality. So how far this constitutional morality and this basic structure theory have any similar ground to run, or whether these two are of the similar nature, or what is the aspect on which we have to discuss some other day. Thank you very much.